Record on the computer. Okay, welcome to
I
Faith
thought it
and
was. I
Calm,
thought it was D.
part number 40. This is part number 40, and this is a Faith and Calm brings the Geula. Is that what you titled it?
No.
No, that's what I titled
exaggerated.
it. Okay. That's what
I
titled
put it in more secular terms so people who didn't know the word Geula would understand.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. We have just last week, we read probably the most exciting, thrill-hanging story about Yosef and his brothers. Everyone knows the basic outline of the story. Yosef's brothers somehow had a problem with Yosef, his dreams, his coat, his whole attitude, and his father's favoritism to him, and they had him sold down to Egypt. And last week, Yosef, after 22 years of being away from his brothers and his family, said, "I am Yosef," and they were all shocked. We have to say a little bit of what the problem was. These were great men, the brothers. And so many people don't understand the story. They think, it's some sort of sibling rivalry having to do with, daddy likes you better. The coat, the coat is favoritism. I don't like your dreams and so forth, but that's no reason to want to kill somebody, to actually try throw them into a pit and have him killed and sent down to slavery in Egypt, which was the end. So actually, Chassidus explains that the story was much deeper than that. The reason that there was what was developing was here that you had Abraham, and then you followed by Yitzchak, and then you had Yaakov, and now the 12 tribes are going to establish what basically was Judaism all about. And it says that the brothers were shepherds. They like to isolate themselves. And they believe that Judaism is best promulgated by being in isolation and being apart from the world. You can involve yourself with the world to an extent, but best is to, it'll get corrupted if you get too involved with the rest of the world. And Yosef's dreams were saying the opposite. They're saying, get involved in business. The business of the world then was not computers, and it was not real estate. It was agriculture. Everything was agriculture. And when Yosef dreamed about agriculture and being the boss of the agriculture meant, being the Jews should be involved in agriculture, and your brothers, you're going to agree with me. You're all going to bow down to my approach. And they said, it's not going to go that way. That will be the destruction of the Jewish people. We're concerned about the future of the Jewish people, and you're putting in a very dangerous idea. And he kept dreaming these dreams, visions, and that's his philosophy. His outlook was that. And so they said, you're so interested in assimilating and in integrating in the outside world, maybe you should go down to Egypt. That's the big world, and get involved in there. So they sent him down to Egypt, and they didn't expect him to survive. And that's why they were shocked, because they couldn't even recognize him, because they couldn't recognize that a Jew could actually survive in that kind of environment, being the second to Paro, and involved in the day-to-day business of running that country. Everything that he came down there had to negotiate with him for the food. So they couldn't see a Jewish boy and that staying Jewish and 100% involved in being a tzaddik, involved in that environment. So when they looked at him, they just couldn't see. They only could see an enemy. And they saw that as, as a harsh, cruel, vindictive, tyrant who wants to take away their son, Benjamin. Their brother. And this is the power of, of our minds, how we see a situation has a very strong effect on exactly on what the reality is. And that was the reality to them. And they had to change. They had to look at it differently. They had to be a mind shift. And the mind shift was, they all of a sudden opened their eyes, and they said they could accept Yosef as being the Yosef. All of a sudden, Yosef was their brother, and he wasn't trying to take away Benjamin, their brother. He was actually trying to protect him. It was a completely different thing. And this is our problem, is so many times we see things, we see it as a confrontation, we see it as a fight, we see it as something to destroy us. And the way we look at the situation, this is the Sfas Emes saying, is we're not seeing the whole picture. We're not integrated to the reality and plugged into the reality of the world. When you're plugged into the reality of the world, it's like the bracha that you say when you eat, have water or some other non-vegetable thing. You say, Sha'akol niya bidvoro, that God created everything. Meaning that if you are aligned with the reality of the universe, you see that everything is actually connected with God. And when you connect to everything, to seeing that everything is connected with God, then all of a sudden, it's not really that these terrible things are really so terrible. And it actually dissolves and you change the situation. This ultimately is what a Geula mentality is. Geula means the redemption mentality. When we look at the world and we look at what's going on in the world, we can look at it in two ways. We can look at it as a threat and destructive and we're a victim. Or we can look at it and we can look at it that we're supposed to look at it, which saying, you know what? I am part of God's existence. I am a flame of God. I am part of his light in this world. I am integrated with him. And in everything in this world, if I was in harmony with the universe and I was in harmony with God, then I would probably be much more attuned to being able to seeing it the way it's supposed to be. It's true. It's true. Not everything always gets resolved as easily as that. There certainly are things that we're still before the time of Moshiach, where there are things that, you know, we should respond to it, and you know, we can't see the truth of it. Can't see that we just went through a funeral. You don't jump around and dance and saying, you know, if I just looked at it the right way, I'd see how great it is. That's true. That's true. There are things that you respond to that way, but on the deeper level, this is very interesting what the Sfas Emes explains. He says that we still have to, even when we see such a thing like that, we have to realize that God is the one who imbues in ourselves that reaction of the negativity and looking at the thing in the negative way. And therefore, God is even in that negative thing. He is the one that causes us those panic attacks and anxiety and fear and other pains. And therefore, he is there with us too in that situation also. And he is not doing it to crush us. He's doing us that we should ultimately rise above it and to be able to overcome it and to be able to use that, even the negative energies, to increase more light. I certainly saw it this week with David. He never spoke. He never spoke as well, you know, as much as from the heart when he was at the funeral. He spoke about his mother. Okay, what?
Okay, good. People
Okay.
tuned in, they don't know who David is.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Okay, but
A young friend.
it doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
And he spoke from the heart. He spoke earnestly. He spoke from the depth. And he moved like 100 people there to, you know, it was just, people just really saw what, you know, what his mother was and who he was. And it was just amazing. And so there are sparks of holy goodness that even in the darkest places. It's us that we see that cause the hindrance, that causes the block, that we see it as a confrontational situation. There's a nice, cute story that sort of captures this a little bit, just a little bit. There was a boy who used to walk home from school every day. And one day, his mother hears on the weather forecast that there's going to be lightning and thunder. So she rushes in the car to the school so that he shouldn't walk home. But she got there a little too late, and he had already left. So she's driving home along the streets trying to find him. And she sees him out there in the rain. And he's looking up at the sky and he's smiling. And every time the lightning goes off, he looks up and he's laughing and he's happy. And his mother says, "Get out of the rain, get in the car." And she says, "And why are you so happy?" And he says, "Listen, you know, God is shooting off flash bulbs and taking pictures. I want to look good in the picture. I want to look good." So, you know, you know, you could see it as, you know, as the rain coming down and the lightning, or you could see it through a child's eyes, which is, you know, it's wonderful. It's good. There's something wonderful here. Okay, it's always good for us to look at it a little bit like a child and so forth. But the truth of the matter is, that, you know what, that if we look at everything as a victim and we look at it as we're a victim and everything for, we develop these hard skins, these hard shells around ourselves, and we're always trying to protect ourselves, and we never really connect with other people or other things because we're always, cynical, sarcastical, and trying to protect ourselves. And that's true. That's part of life. We got hurt, and then we do get hurt many times in life, and we do have to develop we do develop that kind of core. But when we do develop that kind of that armor around ourselves, that everything is, is the next, we don't ever know when the next curveball is coming and where everything is going to be bad. And we also lose out a lot of life because we're always, projecting our negativity on the world around us. And when we project the negativity, sometimes that comes back to us too. And that's how that's what we perceive is coming back at us. So I was listening to Rabbi YY, and he was he was a flown-in call situation, and they were asking him these questions, and they said, how do you look at the situation? How do you look at the things in a Geuladic way? And how do you, and who helped you? Who inspired you to look at it differently? So he mentioned the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he said, one thing that when you stood in front of the Rebbe was that, there were two things. The first one was the Rebbe never looked at anybody or anything as being mediocre. He didn't recognize mediocrity. You stood in front of the Rebbe saw you as an infinite flame, a piece of godliness, a person who was able to accomplish an infinite amount. And he didn't see us as some sort of bumbling victim fool or something else that, can never get things straight. He saw you as fantastic, as capable. And he said that was empowering. And a lot of people felt themselves after a while of being around the Rebbe, like himself, I have that power in me because I'm hanging around him. He sees me this way. Maybe I do have that ability. The Rebbe did that. He inspired people, continues to inspire people, that they should be able to see themselves in a Geuladic way. And the Geuladic way means that you are part of the divine harmony. You are a light on the menorah, and your job is to bring light and illumination and love out into this world. And you can do that, and you can affect a tremendous amount of people and a tremendous amount of good in this world. And the more you shine out, the more that happens, and the more you will feel from the world coming back that shine to you. So he brings a cute story, and it just happened recently, and it sort of illustrates this idea. So Rabbi YY, he has a cousin. Cousin's name is Yerachmiel Gerelik. Yerachmiel Gerelik is the shaliach in a place called Tumen, Russia, Siberia. It's probably one of the far most northern communities in Siberia. The temperature rarely gets above 10 below zero. It's cold. And on Hanukkah, he decided that he was going to have a Hanukkah program. So on Hanukkah, you want to make an outdoor menorah. It's hard to find wood there, but ice was not a problem. So he made a menorah out of ice. 2.5 tons of ice, 14-foot tall menorah, and made a menorah out of ice and had the whole community come and, to sing there, and they're wearing their masks and their coats and everything else, and it was outdoors. And there was an Israeli news program in Israel that heard about this and said, this is a great story. We'll show this for Hanukkah. The guy named Amnon, I don't know, Amnon Netziv, I think it was his name. Anyway, Amnon, he gets on, he does this program, and Amnon happens to be a hardcore Israeli leftist political kind of guy, but it's Hanukkah. So he gets on, he broadcasts this Hanukkah menorah live in Israel. And everybody's out there and they're all singing and so forth. And Amnon is also singing along with them, and so forth. Because, it's one of the things, that happens is that, Israelis, when they're in Israel, they can be very hard and very, very protective and very cynical and very sarcastic about anything religious and so forth. you and your menorah and everything else, and have anything to do with it. And you Haredi people, you're all parasites, reaching off the government. But you can't say that about somebody in Russia, in Siberia. He's not mooching off the government, and he's not doing it. He's doing it out of sincerity, and warmth and openness. It reflects back warmth and openness and sincerity, even from the most hard person. You can't respond that way. So that's what the Shaliach told him. He says, here we're in Siberia, we're lighting it. And Ramnon asked him, he said, what do you have to say about this lighting the ice menorah? And he says, this is Rachmiel Gerelich speaking. He says, when I first came to Siberia, I was told that I was sent here to be able to melt the coldness of Siberia. But now that I've got there and I've been here for a while, I realize that that's not really my mission. My mission is to actually make the ice itself into a menorah, and it itself should glow. And that's internalizing the Rebbe's message about how the Geula presentation is. You see, Moshiach and Geula is not like Moshiach just flies into the scene like some flying Lashon Kugel eater from outer space. It's each of us opening our eyes and opening the doors of perception and opening and being able to see that actually everything is in harmony. We are part of that divine music, and we are part of that divine score, and our job is to illuminate in this world, and it's all part of good. Even the difficult things are part of things to help us grow and to become better. So it's all part of that. And so therefore the ice itself is not to be destroyed. The ice is to be able to glow and to turn into a menorah. That's Geula perception. And Amnon was very moved by this. And he, this Shaliach was saying, Amnon, he says, it's not about me, it's about you. You are the one that publicizing this. And Amnon saying back to him, he says, you're the one who's lighting the menorah. And he says, no, Reb Amnon, you're the one who's broadcasting it. So you are the one that's inspired. And you actually could see that this guy was getting into it. He was not the hard Israeli anymore. All of a sudden, he was saying, Amen, 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 Amen. And, it's hard to imagine what is the bigger miracle. Was the big miracle the fact that the Shliach was lighting the menorah, or was it that this Israeli with a cold heart who would usually say, wouldn't have anything to do with menorahs and Dati'im or anything else, was actually promulgating the idea of Hanukkah in Israel? And who knows how many Israelis lit the menorah because they were inspired by the situation. So he was lighting other people's menorahs. And this is what it is. This is when you shine love, when you shine yourself, when you shine a Geula perspective out into the world, you can melt the hardest, coldest, most, like this kind of person, who's always, very difficult to deal with. And every time you get on the phone, biting your nose or something like that, every time you mention something, you can melt them, because ultimately everybody's looking for connection. Everybody's looking for warmth, and everybody's looking for love. It's just that they're worried about that they're going to get hurt because they've been hurt in the past. But if you're sincere, and this guy was sincere, this guy in Russia, then you melt other people's hearts, and that's the message. Now the story doesn't actually end there. The story goes on. The next day, the Shaliach texts back and he says, "You won't believe what happened." So this morning, I get a text message from the chief of the Russian Orthodox Church of that city, the head priest. And he says, "I need to meet with you." So the rabbi says, "Where and when?" He says, "Right now, let's go to the menorah." So they meet at the menorah. It's 10 degrees below zero. They're standing outside the menorah. The priest goes over, he goes to the menorah, and he gives it a big kiss. The ice. And the rabbi, yeah, I know, I don't think, your lips get stuck to the menorah. And the rabbi says, "What's this?" And the guy says, "Well, actually, my grandmother, my mother's mother, was Jewish. And when I saw this menorah on the TV, it reminded me of my Jewish upbringing, and reminded me that I'm a Jew. So I came and I kissed the menorah. So I'm the Levi. I'm the Levi. He hears the story. So the next day in Israel, he's back on the news again. He's back, he's saying, well, what is with this, this menorah business and so forth. And he says, because it's just like, it touched him. It touched him, and it touched everybody, it touched people that, because when you're sincere, when you're open, and when you're warm, and you see the world in a Geula-dic way, and the difference between Geula and Galus, the words in Hebrew, is just one thing, an aleph. When you bring the aleph, which is the Rebbe would always say, the aleph means the alufa sha'olam, the aleph of the world. When you bring the Eibishter, God, into the picture, it changes the Galus, the coldness and the exile, into a Geula, into the redemption. And that's our mission. Each one of us, when we do this, when we look at the world in a different way, not like the rest of the world, who's always, in fear and that this is going to happen and what's going to happen next. But we look at it in a Geula-dic way. We look at it as, I am part of this divine symphony, and there's no thing to worry about, because I'm here on a mission. Like Yosef said to his brothers, I was sent here. You thought that you were sticking me in a pit and burying me. The truth is, what you were doing is planting me so that I could grow, and I could grow food for all the Jewish people. So I'm not being persecuted here. I'm actually I'm here on a mission, and I'm here to create light. And every time we do that, and it's hard work. I understand that. And there's a lot of our initial reaction is defensive, especially when people get aggressive and negative with us. Then we also get aggressive. Yeah, that's part of it, and acknowledge it. Acknowledge that that's part of who we are. But acknowledge that, that God put that emotional reaction into us. And therefore, God is with you even in those situations. He's there. He's real. He's with you. And you have the power and the ability, as the Rebbe said, you're not mediocre. You're able to cause a whole transformation. So here's this shaliach in the far northern part of Siberia. He's just one little guy far away from everybody else, but he's having a huge effect on the whole Israeli public because they're broadcasting him live. So think of yourselves, like that little kid, you're in the picture, you're in the movie, and you're broadcasting, and you're having an effect. It may not be you may not think it's a huge effect, but you're having a great effect. And I think that's what I mean. Faith and calm brings the Geula. You have faith and you have calm, and you trust in Hashem. And yes, that's hard. It's because it's using a muscle that we don't usually use, which is our muscle of Emunah and faith. It's not our seichel, it's not our intellect. But you use it again and again, and you know what? It affects and it connects with other people, and you walk down the street and they say, "Wow, there's a person. They're shining. They're interesting. I want to have what they have, because somehow, they're not all crushed by what's going on." And that has an effect on people. That has an effect on people. So I'm going to turn the camera over to my wife. Don't nobody lag off here. She's going to tell you more about what makes her inspired and what keeps going, and then we'll have some chit-chat and conversation back and forth. Are there any questions on what I had to say? Did any of it make sense?
In beautiful sense, yes, Hashem.
Can you roll back a little bit, though? Can you hear me?
Yeah, roll back to
my
what?
question goes back to Joseph and his brothers.
Sure.
So the version you referenced this evening was that they sent him down to Egypt, but
Yes.
that's very different from being sold as a slave.
They thought, see, it's gone playing on two levels here.
I know, I get it. I get that, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'm also looking for the seed of truth in this.
No,
Very
It's
complicated.
on both levels.
Okay.
The truth is on both levels.
Yes,
On one level, it's terrible what they did.
no, she's asking what's the actual fact. The actual fact is that they sold him as a slave. They didn't know what would happen to him, and the Arabs that they sold him to brought him down to Egypt. Those are the hard facts.
But what Yosef said was, you didn't really do this. God was the one involved, and he sent me, and I was not being, you thought you were selling me. It's not what happened. That's what I said last week. It's not what you said. God has sent me here. on a mission, and the mission was going to happen in one way or the other. But all the time, I never looked myself as a victim. I never looked at myself as being, you know, as a terrible case, being away from my father, family, everything else for 22 years. I was actually here, and I was given powers to be able to overcome it. So this is these two levels of the story that's playing out in the Chumash, you know, Yosef, and how he looks at it and how he uses that to survive the situation, because otherwise he should look at himself as, it's terrible. I mean, my brothers are trying to kill me. I have no family in this world. God just keeps throwing me into these terrible situations with Potiphar's wife and in the dungeon and all these other kinds of things. And, you know, anybody, as I said, should think of themselves as a terrible basket case, but, you know, he didn't look at himself that way. So yeah, the Geula mentality. Moshe was establishing our ability to look at things through a Geula mentality. All right, so welcome, Amy, and I will turn over the camera to Shalom Meshudas.
Okay,
Thank you. Yasher Koach.
you. That was beautiful, Sushima. Okay. Amy, you'll have to look at it on YouTube because it was really beautiful, the Haskell Shimon section. So anyway, I want to say hello to everybody. Hello to Dina, hello to Devorah, hello to Chaviva, Faith, Yael, Sari, Emily, Molly, Amy. Hello, everybody. And you can't see me that way. I have to turn it this way. And okay, so this is session 40. And does anybody want to say anything before I start? Oh, Dina, you look so beautiful. I'm so happy you turned on your camera. Okay. Anybody want to say anything before we start? Okay, so mine is going to be sort of a continuation of Haskell Shimon's, and you'll hear. There's a good story. So, so anyway, to start the way I always start, number one, we're in a unique time. And we're in a unique time, not because of the pandemic, but because we are in the unfolding of the redemption. How do we know that? Because the Lubavitcher Rebbe told us that. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe predicted many things, many public events, and he was never wrong. And we'll talk more about that. We'll talk specifically about that. How do we know it's true? Anyway, the second thing is that we were created to be at this moment. Our souls were destined to be at this moment in time, this unique juncture in human history. And Hashem is helping us. He gives us the Torah to tell us exactly what to do. He gives us leaders like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, like Moses, like all these things. He gives us mitzvahs to help us. Mitzvahs are channels for blessing, and they help the whole world as well. And what we're doing tonight is purposeful. What we're doing tonight actively fuels the process of redemption. So I want to do a very brief review of things we covered in the past, and you can, and if you missed those classes, those sessions, you can tune into them. On session 38, we were talking about the importance, if you want to have a life of faith and calm, it's important to know about something called the Yetzer Hara. Hashem gave each person, each Jew at least, I'm not sure about non-Jews, but probably everybody, but I know about Jews. He gave us not only a soul, but he gave us a challenger called the Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara's assignment is to rip the Jew away from their true self. That's his assignment, to rip you away from who you really are. Why would God do such a thing? Why? Because he knows, God knows and understands that anything that we get, that we succeed at through our own effort is infinitely more precious to us than something that's given to us as a gift. But it's important to know that inside you, you have a voice. It's noisy, it's demanding, it wants you to bow down to it. And it's simply the Yetzer Hara. And you have to say, no, excuse me, I'm like this with Hashem. I'm going to listen to what he says. I'm going to do what Hashem wants me to do at this minute. And sorry, go away. And the last week, we talked about another part of it, that it's important to know who you are. It's important to know who you are. If you're going to be faithful to who you are, you have to know who you are. And, you know, that was one of the first things that attracted me to the frum world, to the Orthodox world, the Torah observant world, because I grew up in the secular world, And in the secular world, when I grew up in it, now maybe it's a tiny bit different, but when I grew up, nobody talked about who you were. They talked about what you were: lawyer, Indian chief, doctor, journalist. Who are, people didn't talk about who they wanted to be. They only talked about what they wanted to be. And when I stumbled on the Torah observant world, all of a sudden, the what you wanted to be shrank in importance, and the who you wanted to become was everything. You wanted to be a good person. You wanted to align yourselves with good values. You wanted to help people. You wanted to make the most of every minute. You wanted to, it was a completely different dialogue, completely different concept. So years ago, I came up with an idea of who I am, and I came up with this definition that I am a joyful uncoverer of the greatness of life and the greatness of every other Jew, and every other person, every other Jew. And today I would say I feel that's still true for me, but I would say that I'm something else also. And that is that I'm a Jew. That's my primary definition. I'm a Jew, which means I'm a piece of God. And it means that there's nothing more important for me than to act like a piece of God. There's nothing more important to me in the world than to live who I was meant to be, who I was created to be. Okay, that's our review. This week we're going on to, so I said we're going to talk about this prophecy. I'm going to tell you, we're going to do a tiny little thing on how do we know that the Rebbe's prophecy is true. The Rebbe said the Geula is unfolding, the redemption is unfolding. How do we know it's true? It's true the Rebbe has an incredible batting average, but there's more than that. And then after that, I'm going to tell you a compelling story about a woman. You can probably figure it out from Yeheskel Shimon's first half of the story, but a woman that I admired very much who passed away this week. So, and it's a compelling story. It's like, it shows you a different way to be. So anyway, how do we know that the Rebbe's prophecy is true? Okay, number one, incredible batting average. I never came across anybody with the Rebbe's batting average. It was a perfect batting average, right? If the Rebbe predicted something, it came true. And he told us that we are entering into the time of the redemption. It's unfolding. So the Rebbe himself told us in a talk in the summer of 1991. The parsha was Shoftim, and the Rebbe told us that something that is told a person can foretell something as a great Torah sage. They can foretell something as a hunch, but if they say they're telling you this as prophecy, that means it's a done. If it's a good thing, it means it's a done deal that it's going to happen. And when the Rebbe said that Moshiach is here and the process is unfolding, he said, I want you to know that I'm not saying this I'm not saying this as a sage. I'm not saying this as I forgot what else, as a teacher. I'm saying this in the role of prophecy. I'm saying this as a prophecy. And in another session, perhaps we'll discuss. I don't want to make this session too long, so remind me, and I'll tell you how we know that the Rebbe qualified as a prophet. But he completely meets the criteria for prophet. There are criteria, and he meets them. And he said, "I'm telling you, this is a prophet, and therefore." If somebody who is a proven prophet tells you something, the Rebbe says, "Shezehu bevadaus." This bevadaut, if you want to say it in modern Hebrew, this is a done deal. This is a certain thing. Now it's true. There's a rule in Torah that if a prophet gives a negative prophecy, then if the Jewish people repent, they do teshuvah, that's the Hebrew word, then they can nullify a bad prophecy. But a true prophecy, once it's uttered by the prophet's lips, it must come true. And in fact, every prophecy, not only uttered by a Torah sage, but every prophecy uttered by Moses, every prophecy recorded in the Torah has come true. None of them have been disproven. And people try very hard to disprove the things in the Torah, and none of them have been disproven. For example, do I have my little card, or did I forget it? Oh yeah, I forgot it. It's not here. So, oh, here it is. So here's just a couple things recorded in the Torah, the prophecies, that the Jews will always be a minority among the nations. Remember, the Torah was written 3,300 years ago. Even if you even if you were to be fooled and buy the silly idea that the Torah was a bunch of stuff put together by different people 2,000 years ago, that's still a long time ago. First of all, it's not true. The Torah was written 3,300 years ago and given to us. It says thousands of years ago, it was predicted we will always be a minority among the nations. We will be exiled repeatedly. We will be scattered across the face of the earth. We will be singled out for persecution. We will be like a lamb among 70 wolves. We will try to assimilate. We will try, and the nations won't let you assimilate. We will eventually return to our homeland. All other great nations will perish. We will outlive our enemies. We will never perish. And there were kosher prophecies in there that there's only like a handful of animals that have just one of the kosher signs, but not both. There are many animals that have none. Those are non-kosher animals. And then there are animals that have both kosher signs. They chew their cud and they have split hooves. But there's only less than a handful that have either one sign or the other sign, but not both. That makes them not kosher. But people have tried. They've turned the world over to find one more example, because the Torah insists you won't find another example, and nobody ever found another example. It's anyway, that's just a couple things. So anyway, so the Alter Rebbe tells us that the Rebbe says in that talk, you should look at what the Alter Rebbe says about something said through prophecy. The Alter Rebbe explains why something that comes through prophecy has to come true. There are different ways to see into the future. A person who's a tremendous Torah scholar, but not a prophet, but a tremendous Torah scholar, can figure things out just by his knowledge of the upper worlds. And he can say something is going to happen. He can see something in the higher realms. But what he says as a sage, not a prophet, will not necessarily come true. Why? Because he sees it as it is in the upper worlds. By the time it filters down to our world, it has to go through many obstacles, many different levels, and in going through those levels, it can lose it, and it can never come. It's possible that it won't come to be. So, but if a prophet sees something in the upper worlds and it comes out of the prophet's lips, he voices it, that means it's already in the world, because he has given expression to it with his lips. It is words. The whole world was created by words. So that means it's in the world. And once it's in the world, it is a done deal. So the Rebbe said he's saying this as a prophet. It's a done deal. So let's go on to our story for tonight. I'm going to give you a living example of faith and calm. And I'm going to call her name, just for anonymity's sake, I'm going to call her name by her Hebrew name. Her name is Frida Bas Shalom. And I knew Frida Bas Shalom very well. And not well enough, but I knew her very well. You can't know such a person well enough. And this is the story that I'd like to tell. So now, Frida Bas Sarah was an incredible person. Why was she incredible? From the first months that I met her, I told her son, her only son, who was 7 at the time, "Your mother is a spiritual giant."
Huh.
And this little 7-year-old in his backwards turned baseball cap looked at me. Huh? It's hard for a 7-year-old to, that's his mother, that's his mommy, who doesn't know any different. But he doesn't know what's out there. His mother was a spiritual giant. And I'm going to tell something, she developed Parkinson's at an early age when she was 38 years old. And she went through so many difficult diagnoses, not just Parkinson's, so many difficult things, more than, totally more than a person's fair share. And she did it all with the most incredible graciousness and faith and calm. I'm just going to give you one small episode, which I consider a miracle story, and I'll let you decide what you think of it. And I want to ask you questions at the end because I want you to help me with this. So anyway, my story takes place in a long time ago, November. Well, not so long ago, November 2015. In November 2015, this woman, Frida Bas Shalom, her only son was engaged, and she was already in a nursing home, from the Parkinson's and stuff like that. She was already in a nursing home, and her in-laws were supposed to come to her in-laws to be were supposed to come to the nursing home to meet her, but when they came, she was not there. A van had picked her up early in the morning, and she was taken to the hospital. She had an appointment that nobody told her about, and she found out that she had a serious problem that could be taken care of by surgery, and indeed it was taken care of by surgery 2 months later. But back in November 2015, that proved to be just the tip of the iceberg of difficult things that would happen to her. I tried to get her on the phone, my friend. I tried to get her on the phone all that week at the nursing home after her visit to the doctor, and I couldn't get her. And I called the nursing home. I called the staff, and they told me, "Oh, she's in the hospital." I said, "Oh, she's in the hospital?" She was in my local hospital down the street, Elizabeth. And so I rushed down to the hospital, and I found her room, and I said, what's happening? And she said she had fallen, and for some reason she was collecting fluid in the side of her body, and they were there to drain it. And she didn't know all the ins and outs of her prognosis and stuff like that. I said, "Oh, go get the nurse." I ran to get the nurse. I said, "Why is she here? What's happening?" And she said she has a hematoma, and the hematoma is being drained. And I don't have such a big medical vocabulary, but I said, "Oh, you mean she has a big boo-boo and you're draining it?" And the nurse said, "We don't call it that." And she was furious with me, and she left. Anyway, I was happy that it was something simple. And eventually my friend was let out of the hospital. But then I got an email from from the social worker. There's an angelic social worker at this nursing home. Her name, the angelic social worker her name is Donna. And Donna called me, and she said, "You need to go to Frida's next appointment. You need to go to her next appointment because she's going to," in the email it said, "she's going to need emotional support." And she didn't say anything else. So I texted back, or emailed her back, what's going on? And she said, they found undesirable cells in the fluid that they drained from Frida's body. And she doesn't know about it, and they're going to tell her about it at the appointment. So I went there, and as it turned out, Donna also went there. And the doctor was very blunt. He said, "We found," and he named a certain type of cancer. "We found those cells in the fluid that we took out of your body. And it means that you have a type of cancer that comes from one of your major organs, either from lungs, ovaries," and he named a few others. And he said, "And I'm going to turn you over to an oncologist." And anyway, and we're guessing that you have lung cancer, but I'm turning you over to an oncologist. So we left the appointment. We went out into the dim hallway in the medical offices building, and we waited for the van service to pick up my friend, to bring her back to the nursing home. And it was like, what do you say in such an instance? What do you say? It was like such a bombshell. And so I told my friend Frida, I said, there are things we can do. We can pray more. We can say more psalms. We can do more mitzvahs. And then I told her that there's such a thing as writing to the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a blessing. And it's by now a well-known thing that you can, there's a long-standing Jewish custom that whenever you have a dilemma and there's nobody to ask about it, it's not a question of Jewish law. You can write out your dilemma, your request for a blessing, and insert it into any holy Jewish book, a holy Jewish book, not a regular Jewish book, a holy Jewish book. And you can receive direction. You can insert it at random, open it up to the page that you inserted in, and get direction from that page. And so Lubavitchers, we do it in, the Rebbe wrote thousands of letters, and they're published now, thousands of letters of advice and blessing to people on all sorts of topics. I've told you before that a friend of Amy's and mine once had a child with a heart problem, and my friend was in the middle of a nasty divorce, and the husband wanted the kid to have surgery right away, and my friend wanted to delay, and maybe the kid would get stronger and maybe the problem would go away. And so she put a letter at random in the Rebbe's letters, and she opened up to a letter about heart surgery. And the letter said, "You delayed this long, you can delay a while longer," which is an incredibly specific answer. And that's exactly what they did. They delayed like several months. And then the kid had the operation, and today the kid is married, the kid is gorgeous, the kid is happy, everything. Anyway, so she liked the idea, my friend, and she liked the idea. But anyway, we're still in the offices. We're still in the dim hallway outside the lung doctor's offices, and it was a very, very heavy moment, right? So I wanted to break the tension. We had talked about the problem. I wanted to break the tension. I told her, by the way, your duplex sold just a few days ago, because she had put her duplex in Brookline on the market. And I said, and oddly enough, the winner, the person who bid the highest, was the person who owns the other half of the duplex. Now he's going to have the whole thing. He's a very wealthy doctor who bought the other side of her duplex a few years earlier. And my friend leaned back in her wheelchair, had a big smile on her face, and she said, "I'm so happy for him." And Donna and I looked at each other like, where are we? This woman 15 minutes ago got news that would topple the strongest person in the world and send them into like a tailspin of worry and concern. And here's my friend. She's leaning back in her chair, and she's feeling joy for an extremely rich doctor who now is going to have a double-sized, huge home to call his own. So anyway, that was the beginning. So, and by the way, she never asked me. She didn't even ask me the selling price. Okay, so we go home. Everybody goes. My friend writes right away to the Rebbe. We insert it into a volume of the Rebbe's letters. And what does she ask for? My friend asks for good news about what the doctors told her. She should have good news about it. And on the page she opened to, the Rebbe had written a letter in which said that the person will receive good news, and in return for this good news, the person should take on some kind of meritorious Jewish act, and she should increase in her Torah and mitzvot, and so my friend decided that she's going to start lighting Shabbos candles in the nursing home. You can't light flames in the nursing home, so I called a rabbi, and he said she can turn on an electric light, say the bracha, and just not turn out the light, and that is going to be good enough. So that's what she decided to do. Meantime, we went to the oncologist, and the oncologist was extraordinarily nice. Her name was Dr. I can't say it, Narayansamy, and, a brilliant woman. I don't know if you know, but Dana-Farber, which is one of the top cancer institutes in the world, has a branch in Elizabeth now. And so she saw a top doctor from the top oncology hospital in the world. And she also, doctors today are extremely blunt. And she told my friend she only has a certain amount of years to live, probably not so many years to live. And she said, but you should do okay. And we'll, once we figure out where it's coming from, we'll be able to do some things. It won't expand you don't have forever. You only have a few years, but we can do something about it. And so my friend is listening to all this, and she's managing quite nicely. And I was thinking, meantime, oh my gosh, I remember they said they found it in the liquid outside the lungs. Doesn't that mean that, let's say it came from the lungs or from the ovaries or something else, it's already not in the organ of origin? Doesn't it mean, I was thinking to myself, doesn't it mean it metastasized already? It's let loose in the body. So I leaned over to her and I said, doesn't that mean that? I whispered it to her when my friend was busy talking to the social worker. And she didn't whisper back. She gets right up, she walks over to my friend and she says, and by the way, this means it's already metastasized, it's already let loose in your body. Oh, thank you so much for your, whatever. That's what people do now. They're very, very honest, whether it's right or wrong. They're very, very honest. And I said, is there any possibility, doctor, that this could be a mistake? She said, there is no possibility, zero. This was not a lab test that might have had an erroneous result. These were cells that the top scientists in the Dana-Farber lab looked at under a microscope, and I myself looked at it also. So anyway, we left, and I told my friend not to worry. I said, you started lighting candles. You have an incredible, clear blessing on the page that you opened to from the Rebbe's letters, and don't worry. And I have to tell you that through the next several weeks, one of the most astounding things to me was my own bulletproof confidence that this was going to turn out well. And I kept telling my friend, I believe that doctors are going to be wrong. I believe this is going to turn out well. And many times, whenever I went home, I would say, Shalom Yehudis, how can you do such a thing? I mean, being self-confident is a wonderful thing. But right now, it's the Rebbe's letter and your bulletproof certainty against a team of the top oncologists in the world, But I couldn't help it. My soul was certain that this was going to work out well. And my cohort, Donna, she also, she wasn't Jewish. She got she got my friend, her Hebrew name is Frida. She got her an electric candle to start lighting. And she was on the boat with this optimism thing. But she said, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic. I'm going to prepare our friend for other possibilities, because there are other possibilities. The doctor, meanwhile, said, tell your son. You have to tell your son. And my friend said, I will not tell my son because he's in a very special time of life and I'm not going to spoil it for him. This time of life comes only once. I'm not going to spoil it for him. So anyway, the next several weeks, they x-rayed and they x-rayed and scanned every inch of this woman's body. She had 2 or 3 major exams, major tests each week for like 5 weeks at least. And either I went with her or Donna went with her. One time Donna emailed me, you don't have to go this time. There's not going to be any doctors to question. There's only going to be technicians. They're going to do a PET scan of her entire body. But I knew that if I was going to have such a thing, I would want somebody I knew with me, somebody that I, could rely on with me. And so, I live right by Elizabeth. So I showed up there. I got there first, and then she arrived. She didn't know I was coming. She arrived in the wheelchair with her attendant, and she sees me and she went like this. She was so happy. She was like, you couldn't see a trace of worry on her. She looked like she just won a major sweepstakes. Wow, look at this. I'm so lucky. You're here. And anyway, she went through, I'm gonna skip to the chase. She went through a tremendous series of tests. And one time she went to the doctor, and my friend Donna, Donna, the social worker, and I would email each other about the results of each thing. And we would also email each other about how our friend was reacting to all these things, because it was so remarkable. And Donna emailed me one time that, Dr. Narayana Sami, one time my friend asked her, is euthanasia legal in Massachusetts. And of course, the doctor figures she's succumbing. She's just like, it's too much already. She's succumbing to worry. And so the doctor leaned forward and she said, I'm so sorry. It's not. Anyway, they went home. They went back to the nursing home. Donna knew something was wrong because our friend loves life, loved life. And she said, why did you ask about euthanasia? Are you considering such a thing? And my friend said, what? Of course not. The Torah forbids it completely. Of course I wouldn't consider such a thing. She said, I just know somebody who had cancer, and she went very quickly. And I was wondering if maybe something like that was the cause of it. Anyway, so finally there was only one more test to take. And Dr. Narayana Sami told us we have one more test. It's simply a blood test. It's new, and it's absolutely going to pinpoint where this comes from. And we'll have no questions after this. It's absolutely going to pinpoint. And so my friend had the blood test, and we were scheduled to arrive on a Monday afternoon I believe it was Monday afternoon, to get the results. And I was there, and Donna was there, and my friend was there, and we were waiting in the waiting room. And I said to my friend, there she goes again. There's that mouth of Shlomo Yehudis goes. And I said, it's Hanukkah. I think it was the first day of Hanukkah. And I said, Hanukkah is a time of miracles. And there we are. They tell us it's time to go into her office. We went into her office. She wasn't there yet. The doctor comes in after we got in there, and she closes the door behind her, and she closed it with like a lot of purposefulness, like she wanted privacy. And she looks at my friend and she says, I almost never get to say these words. We were wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. We were wrong. The blood test shows there's nothing in your body. There's absolutely nothing worrisome. There's no cancer whatsoever. And you are fine. We were wrong. And of course, we burst into questions. We were so happy. How could it be? Those cells that you saw them under a microscope. How could it be? And she said, after we got back this last test and all the other tests that were negative, I went back to the head of the lab, and this last test was absolutely conclusive. And we looked at those cells again. We looked long and hard at those cells. And the head of the lab said, cells like that could also have been produced by a fall. Maybe they could have been produced by a fall. Anyway, 5 years have elapsed since that time. My friend attended the wedding of her child. She saw the birth of 2 grandchildren, Baruch Hashem. And this Hanukkah, I sent her that story. I wrote it, and it was so important to me for various reasons. It was just so important to me to get her this. Remember, I'm starting to write on Saturday nights, and I knew, Shlomo Yehudis, you got to get that story out. You got to get it out. And I finished writing it, and I sent it to her on Hanukkah. And she told me she got it, and I asked her for permission to send it to her son and to Donna also. And I did that. I sent it to her son. I didn't send it to Donna yet. And she called me back again after Hanukkah. She called me back she called me back a week ago on Monday. She called me on Monday afternoon just to tell me that she finished going through the story. And she finished going through it, and she wanted to tell me how very satisfied she was with it, and to thank me for a job well done. And somehow I felt this conversation was very important, and I wrote down every word she said. It was like, I don't know why, I was compelled to write down every word she said. And 30 hours later, she returned her soul to her maker. She fell in the nursing home, and she was already in another nursing home, a different nursing home. They rushed her to the hospital. She had an arrhythmia, and and she returned her soul to her maker. And in a miraculous way, Another 36 hours later, she was already interred outside of Yerushalayim in a city called Ramat Beit Shemesh. And anyway, so my question to you is that I never, you know, I've known her for 20, I knew her for 20 years, and I knew she was a giant of the spirit from the beginning, and I admired her from the beginning, but I never asked her, how do you do it? How are you so faithful and calm in this, in throughout all this? How do you manage? And I regret that I never asked her. So I have a theory, but I would like to hear, I mean, I know you didn't know her, but what do you imagine? How do you imagine that somebody weathers a storm like this, weathers repeated storms in such style? Anybody have any, you can unmute yourselves, please.